Good morning. Today, October 17th, 2017, and to my left is Ron Carl, County Attorney. To my right, Jolene Sanchez, Assistant Clerk to the Board. Ms. Sanchez, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Jackson? Here. Commissioner Holland?
Here.
Commissioner Conti?
Good morning.
Good morning. Commissioner Baker?
Here.
And Commissioner Sharp?
Here. Commissioner Holland, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Carl, are there any modifications to the agenda this morning?
No, there are no modifications today.
Thank you. I'll ask for an adoption of the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Jackson, seconded by Commissioner Holland. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none. Motion passes unanimously. Now is the time for citizen comment period. Is there anyone who would like to speak during this period on anything that is not on the agenda this morning? Okay. Seeing no one, we'll move on to the, the consent agenda. And is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second. Motion made by Commissioner Baker, seconded by Commissioner Conti. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. We have, I think that this is not a public hearing. Is the Arapahoe bicycle, is it a public hearing or general business?
It says public hearing, but
I know.
It probably should have been a general business. Who's here?
I will ask anyone who, if anyone wants to speak, but I believe it's a general business item. And our presenter is Ray Wynn, Planner, Open Spaces, and are you?
I'll be the attorney.
Okay. And Ron Carl will be our county attorney, will be the attorney on this matter. Is there a foundation that needs to be set?
No, there's no foundation that needs to be set on this matter. So it was posted as part of the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Okay. And Ray, are you gonna? Okay. Welcome. Thank you.
Is there a button you press? Or, okay, there you go. Thank you. Commissioners, thank you for your time today, and thank you for your support throughout this project over the last 2 years. The Arapahoe County Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan identifies bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure projects, and we call these facilities, bicycle and pedestrian facilities. These bicycle and pedestrian facilities create a network that connects the entire county to where we live, work, and play in the most relaxed and least stressful way possible. The projects that encompass the network are a long-term vision and will be constructed over the next 20 to 30 years. As you already know, this plan has had intensive amount of public outreach and has received tremendous support from the public. We have already come to you during multiple study sessions in the past throughout various stages of the plan over the last 2 years. Today, we're seeking final adoption of the plan and its policies. So the vision for the plan is Arapahoe County's bicycle and pedestrian network will be a comprehensive system of on-street, trail facilities or on-street and trail facilities that safely connects neighborhoods and destinations and encourages walking and bicycling for travel and recreation. The goals include goals for biking and walking activity, access and connectivity, health and safety, education and outreach, a land use context, and coordination and partnership. The major technical tasks over the last 2 years have been extensive data collection. We've created the goals, objectives, and performance measures that we brought and approved from the Board of County Commissioners. The design guidelines that I'll speak to later, a network development, implementation plan that includes phasing, priorities, and responsibilities, and education enforcement and encouragement programs. So most folks don't know whether they're walking or biking in Aurora or Centennial or unincorporated Arapahoe County. So we created a project advisory committee, and that consisted of all the municipalities in unincorporated or in Arapahoe County, unincorporated Arapahoe County, also agencies partners like South Suburban Parks and Recs, bordering agencies like Douglas County, Denver, Jeffco, and Adams. And we brought specialists in from all of these different agencies and jurisdictions to go over and vet all of the current infrastructure and include all of the plans that they have for future planning efforts for bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, and to also vet what we're proposing with the current plan. Like I said, public involvement has been very extensive with this plan. We've had over 6,700 hits to our website for the project. We had 4,500 people answer the call for the telephone town hall, which was the most participated telephone town hall that we have ever had in Arapahoe County. We reached over I worked personally with 15 local businesses throughout the plan to update them about different public meetings, get their support for local bike shops and local running shops. We reached over 62,000 people through social media, thanks to Caitlin Wilson and her great efforts from the communications department. That's over 10% of the population of Arapahoe County. So part of our outreach was our online survey. We had a lot of people answer this survey, and the pedestrian and the bicycling results kind of mirror each other in the top items that people would like, which are more facilities, and those are bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure facilities, avoiding high traffic areas, and safer intersections. So through all of this public input that we gathered, there's a couple key themes here. The top results are that people want more, so they want new bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure facilities. They want better connectivity, so they want these facilities to connect better to each other. We had a lot of positive feedback too, which shows that kind of mirrors the great support that we've had for this plan from the public. And then user etiquette and safe crossings were also high on the priority list, which we heard throughout the project. So public input informs the network development. This is how all of the public input mechanisms we had and we did with the public, with our outreach, kind of inform this network that we are proposing with the bicycle and pedestrian master plan. The map up in the top left is a snapshot of a map that we had on our website, where over 400 people identified places where they'd like either safer crossings or bike lanes or things like that, and that kind of went in to create the backbone of the network that we are proposing. National studies show that 51 to 56% of the population are really interested but concerned for their safety. They're interested in riding, they're interested in commuting to work, but they're concerned about the safety of riding in traffic. So those are really the people that we need to target if we want to make an impact in getting people walking and biking more and taking some of those trips off the street. So the goal is to increase the interest and decrease the concern. We can do this through reducing the level of stress that folks experience when they're biking, and we can measure this level of stress based on traffic speeds, road and trail width, and how much protection from traffic certain bicycle infrastructure facilities provide. So if that's, paint on the street, or if that's an actual separation from the bike lane and the traffic. This is the analysis of the level of traffic stress. And as you can see, the high stress roads like Arapahoe and Chambers, those are in red. We want to avoid those. Those are not fun for anyone really to bike on. And we want to focus more on the green streets and maybe some of the yellow streets. And when we get into the yellow streets, we increase that safety level for the facility. So that would be, more of that separated lane. This is how we created the on-street bicycle network. These are the important considerations we did when we looked at the on-street development. The trail development uses the same considerations, except we also looked at ownership and public land corridors. One of the things that I do want to emphasize with the trail development is that we primarily looked at bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. We do note that equestrians are allowed on all of our trails, but we did not specifically create this plan just for equestrian use. So this is the proposed network, the on-street bike and trail network. The gold corridors represent future drainages where trails could be put in, just like Cherry Creek was identified around 30 years ago as being an important trail corridor. This is the on-street network for the western portion of the county. It identifies bike infrastructure facility types with the graphic examples, so it gives that kind of visual of what each facility looks like. It identifies existing with the solid lines and proposed infrastructure with the dashed lines. So the bicycle facility types that I mentioned before, we give those graphic representations. This is what we're proposing in the plan. This is kind of the nuts and bolts of it. These are the different infrastructure facilities with the graphic examples, and it shows the mileage of existing facilities and the mileage of facilities that we're proposing. If you notice in the box, the orange box, the shared roadways, the shouldered bikeways, the bike lanes, the buffered bike lanes, that's really the big meat of what we're proposing in this plan. And the great thing about that is that those are all really low stress, and because they're low stress, they don't require that much infrastructure. Those are all paint facilities. You can create all those facilities just with paint. This can be done in conjunction with resurfacing projects and roadway maintenance projects. So when it's all completed in, like I said, the long 20, 30-year vision, this is what we'll have is this regional bike network. This is the bike highway, if you were to look at it like that. This regional network will create a relaxing, low-stress bike interstate, making regional trips possible to more people without having to use a car. With the recent e-bike legislation that allows e-bikes on multi-use trails and e-bikes are soaring, this becomes an even greater opportunity for more of the population, for underage drivers and for seniors. These are the projects broken down by sidewalks, on-street bike facilities, and trail facilities. So we have 93 sidewalk facilities, 339 on-street bike facilities, and 222 trail facilities. We already have 11 projects that have been identified by the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan. that are in the works. An example of this is Eilif and E470 Trail and the last mile trail connections for the Aurora Light Rail. We took all of the projects and we prioritized them, and the way we prioritized them was through an evaluation criteria. The evaluation criteria directly correlate with the goals that were approved in the beginning that I spoke about. So biking and walking activity, what is the pedestrian and bicycle demand? We have data and analysis for that. Access and connectivity. So what are some of the projects that eliminate barriers, that close gaps, that create regional routes? There's a health and safety aspect. So number of bicycle or pedestrian crashes. We have data for that, so we can identify places that need those facilities because they're a danger to folks. And then the last is the land use context. So low income and minority populations, as well as land ownership, public versus private, all went into evaluating the projects. So the project prioritization results, they're broken down for each municipality and unincorporated Arapahoe County. So these are the categories that have are categorized by the prioritization. So the plan also identifies 6 specific land use types specifically found in Arapahoe County and makes pedestrian improvement recommendations for each typology. So the plan looked at, okay, these are kind of the areas that exist in Arapahoe County. So transit station areas, school zones, main streets, downtowns like in Littleton. We have rural areas, suburban residential areas, and suburban commercial. And it makes specific recommendations for pedestrian improvements for each of those typologies. Another major element of the plan is the design guide. The design guide is for on-street and off-street treatments with specific bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure facilities. The design guide was refined specifically for Arapahoe County and uses nationally recognized references. For open spaces, this gives us our first ever design guide to use with contractors when constructing new trails. We didn't have that before. For public works, the next step is to take the design guide to a formal design standard. While public works already has standards that identify bike and pedestrian infrastructure, but including the design guide into these current standards gives a bigger toolbox for public works to use to enhance safety and mobility for walking and biking in the county. One thing that we heard throughout all of our public outreach was bicycles don't obey traffic laws, motorists don't obey traffic laws, and walkers have long leashes. There was, lots of consternation between each group. And so a big portion of the plan also focuses on the education, enforcement, and encouragement recommendations for all of the municipalities in Arapahoe County, with specific recommendations of what we can do to kind of get the word out about who's responsible for what and how to act properly when you're out there. So the policy recommendations are kind of the meat of the plan. The plan identifies 20 policy recommendations and supporting strategies. These include modifications to the county's land development code to require developers in unincorporated Arapahoe County to construct bicycle and pedestrian facilities and amenities. So these specifically were recently adopted by the Planning Commission as an amendment to the comprehensive plan. And the Planning Commission spoke very highly that they like the fact that we are able to actually require this on developers, because if left to their own account, there's a lot of gray area, there's uncertainty about exactly what they're supposed to do, what they're supposed to be required to do, and what they need to do, and then what actually gets done. So the Planning Commission often sees these development come in, and it's like a new 7-Eleven. Well, how are people going to get from the new 7-Eleven to their homes without a sidewalk. So they were really excited about that, and they just passed that on the 4th of October. There's also adjustments to the county standards and processes to facilitate implementation of projects in unincorporated Arapahoe County, and coordination between Arapahoe County and other agencies and organizations to implement projects and programs. Like I said, a lot of these projects border or go into multiple jurisdictions and municipalities, so that coordination is really important. So the plan review process, this is one of the last steps. So the adoption here today by the Board of County Commissioners is the last step to adopt the plan. The next step, if you adopt this, will be to go out to our agency partners and get support through various mechanisms through them, whether that's a letter of support or formal adoption by them. We have had many municipalities have already indicated that they will be adopting the plan, or they will be using the data and recommendations from the plan to develop their own local plans for their specific municipalities. Commissioners, thank you so much for your time and support during the last 2 years.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Great job on all of this. Commissioner Conti?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wondering, can you give us a list of which municipalities have said that they would be willing to adopt?
So Littleton said that they would be willing to adopt. We were waiting on adoption from the board before we actually went out with that process. Greenwood Village has said that they will not be adopting, but they will be supporting it, and that they will be using all of the information from the plan to create their own specific municipal bike and pedestrian plan. The city of Centennial used a lot of the data in creating their recent plan that they just created. But that was sort of the next step. We wanted us to take the lead and say, we're adopting this. Will you adopt this, or will you support it? And that's kind of what we're going to do next.
Commissioner Conti?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Also, recently in my own neighborhood, we had a new overlay put over the main road that goes through my development, and then, of course, fresh paint followed. And I noticed that there were what I thought was going to be bike lanes, but they were like double bike lanes with no corresponding lines connecting the two. And I'm just wondering, is that City of Littleton going rogue on its own, or do they have their own plan or idea, or is it not finished yet, or do you have any idea?
I don't know anything about that. Brian might know something about that.
Thank you, Commissioners. Brian Weimer, Transportation Division Manager. With regard to your question specifically about Littleton, can't really answer what they were doing, but in terms of the cross-hatching in between lines, it depends on the separation that they have. To provide a buffered lane, which it sounds like that is, there is not a need to cross-hatch it if it's within a certain distance, typically 18 inches, 2 feet. You do not have to do that. If you have a wider area, then you need to cross-hatch that out because it looks like something else. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it is wider than 18 feet to 2 inches, so I'll be awaiting further paint. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Holland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to commend the Planning Commission and the work that you've done in addressing many of these issues. One of my major concerns has always been public safety for both the pedestrians and the automobile. In factoring the totality of the future plans, what role and how significant was the safety aspect considered when putting together your plan?
So safety was really the number one priority. Like I said before, the entire plan is developed around low-stress networks. Low stress only happens in safe environments, so where there's not a lot of traffic volume or a lot of traffic speed. And that is the heart of the plan, is to identify those low-stress connections to existing facilities. So when I talked about the green in that low-stress network, Those were facilities that have been nationally recognized and identified as being safe for even children to ride on. So by creating that low-stress network, we're hoping to get that interested but concerned population that's about 50 to 60% of the population, encouraging them to ride more because it is safer, it feels safer. And so that was the number one priority of the plan, really. Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Baker and then Commissioner Jackson.
Hi, Ray. Good morning. The statement that you made is that somewhere, I believe at the beginning of the document, is where it says equestrians are welcome on any of the trails.
Correct.
Do you think that might need to be emphasized a little bit more throughout the document rather than just in one place? There are certain trails where equestrians may not be appropriate, just as there may be times or places where a bicycle may not be appropriate.
Sure. So, we don't specifically say that our trails are appropriate for folks in wheelchairs either.
I see.
They just are, so our trails, you can come out there with an equestrian. Whether it's a good experience or not, I don't know. We didn't develop this plan just, with a equestrian component to it. There is not any open space department that I know of in Colorado or in the Front Range that has an equestrian plan. Equestrians, like I said, are allowed on all of our trails. They can use them as they currently are. Some of them are even designed with the equestrian element in mind. One of them is the underpass under Arapahoe Road. That was specifically designed so an equestrian could come under Arapahoe Road. Now, whether that's an experience you want as an equestrian rider is up to you. But we didn't, we could, include in the plan, and I think that we do in a couple of other places, talk about equestrian use, and that equestrians are allowed on our trails.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you. I had two questions. One of them sort of overlaps Commissioner Baker's question, having to do with I myself do not ride horses, but I was just wondering if there was any, I think you answered it, any idea of doing like an equestrian or more, I don't know, do bicyclists prefer a smooth path and horses prefer dirt? I don't know.
We've heard different things from different groups of people. So cyclists obviously prefer a paved path, especially if they're commuting. We've heard different things from the equestrian community, in regards to the type of material. So soft surface material on our trails or crusher fine trails. We've heard that gets in their hooves. For not knowing much about equestrians, I would think that they would prefer a soft surface trail. So we have a bunch of soft surface trail that we just put in at the fairgrounds that will eventually connect into the Triple Creek system, which is another soft surface system that they will be able to use for miles and miles and miles. That's identified in the plan, and there's already a lot of soft surface on the Highline Canal as well that's in Arapahoe County. That if that's what their preference is, then they can use that as well.
Okay. I have an idea, but I'll talk to you later.
Oh, sure.
The second question had to do with this map, which I love maps, and I'm looking at it here. And if you thought I was doing my email, I was just looking for things on this map. And one of the things I noticed on it is that
Map?
Oh, I'm sorry, you can't see it.
Is it this one?
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Is that the trails end at Denver or another county, and if I were going to use this map, I want to, maybe because of the way some of the districts are, I might want to cross into that foreign country there. And I'm wondering if there is a map or you could foresee a time where, I get it that you want to mark off the other region, but if there would be a way to connect those trails so that a bicyclist didn't feel like they were going to, or an equestrian or a walker, wouldn't feel like they were at the end of the earth when they hit Denver.
Yeah. So one of the things that came out of the plan was, like I said, we were able to get all of the surrounding municipalities as well as jurisdictions to vet the current infrastructure. And one of the things that came out of that is we actually just produced a map that shows the regional trails that go from Arapahoe County into Denver. Part of the reason why we only show the trails in Arapahoe County because that's A, what's getting adopted. That's our jurisdiction. And B, there's also somewhat of a liability issue. We don't want to be liable for promising someone, go into these trail systems in Denver, and then they're either never developed or just aren't there. So we did create a map that shows the regional trails. So like if you wanted to get into that, portion of Arapahoe County, that upper left portion, and come back into, you can on the regional trail system. Yeah.
Okay. I had just a couple of questions, and one was there in the mostly modifications to the land development code that say require, so we're requiring a number of things. Can you talk to me about how much, I know it says require, which means they must do it if they're going to develop. How many of these are done anyway as part, well, let me back up. Were these in the land development code requiring or mandating these types of, like sidewalks, for example? Were they already mandated in the land development code? And so that's one question, what's kind of new? And then do most of the developers already do my impression is that most of the new developments today already do these things. They're trying to be pedestrian and bicycle friendly, and I'm just looking at thinking about a couple of developments that have come to us in the last couple of years. So can you comment on that?
So with the land development code, part of the required to do something gives developers a clear understanding of what is required. In the past, that has not been the case, and that is where we've gotten some of these disconnected communities from, like we heard from the Planning Commission, the 7-Eleven that doesn't connect to the neighborhood next to it. There's only 93 sidewalk connections, like I said, over the next 20 or 30 years that are on the arterial sidewalks. So if you're creating a development in a neighborhood, that won't really apply to you. You'll be required to put the sidewalk in as designed, but the only thing that the plan is requiring is where the infrastructure is identified in the plan. That's where we want to either work with the developer or get them to understand the type of facility that we would like there. So, if a street's getting put in, it makes a whole lot more sense to stripe the bike lane in when the street's getting put in than it does to go back and do it later. With the sidewalks, one of the commissioners in the Planning Commission mentioned, that they already have to put in the curb and gutter, so that sometimes gets broken in development, big trucks and things going over it. And she was worried about, constructing, a couple of new sidewalk panels. So that, is somewhat of a concern, but it's always cheaper to do it at development than it is to do it later. The required part, I think, just sheds light on the fact that this is what you need to do, and that is how we get it done so we don't have these disconnected elements.
And my question is really of the requirements, additional financial requirements that might, or dollars that might be required of a developer to put in something in their development that they didn't have planned as part of the plan.
Well, that's why it's good to set these clear intentions so they know coming in the pre-development meetings and everything like that, that this is our expectation. And so having that require language actually lets us start that conversation earlier so they can budget for it.
And it's not striping the roads. I think that's pretty, it's pretty expensive to, Brian, to build a sidewalk. And I'm just kind of wondering what triggers, because it's in our policy, but what would trigger if an area didn't have a sidewalk, what would trigger the requirement that it now have a sidewalk? Is it resurfacing the road? Is it putting in curb and gutter? What's the trigger?
Brian Weimer, Transportation Division Manager. So let me first kind of address your first questions, and that is our current standards, land development standards, roadway standards, include curb gutter, sidewalk, and bike lanes or multi-use paths. Those are required already.
Okay.
So those are included in the standards. Developments have to do that. The issue comes into when do those improvements get constructed. Mm-hmm. So you may see examples of where a subdivision comes in, builds the roadway, and this is mostly in, let's call it, maybe commercial areas. We'll use Copperleaf as an example, where a roadway was built to a school, but as part of that roadway, just the roadway was constructed. The pedestrian facilities were not, and that is left up to the adjacent development when it comes in, let it be a commercial development, whatever. The recommendations that come out of these policies would be when you build the roadway, it's a complete street at that time, so you can provide all modes of traffic or mobility at the time of development of the roadway as opposed to adjacent properties coming in and developing next to it. The plan adoption is a policy adoption. The actual requirement would come in through a land development code process amendment that we would have to do, and that would be the next steps of the plan. So there would be an adoption of the land development code with whatever those are, and a public process associated with here's the changes, kind of like you've done in the past with other land development codes. So it's moving some of those improvements up front. If you remember the Prosper development, and included in their development agreement are these requirements so that we don't build facilities that require some interaction and there's no way to get there other than cars. And so it's timing more than an additional cost. It's just when does that cost come in? And that we're looking at it being upfront, because right now what we're encouraging is everybody to drive cars there, and there's no way to get there via a trail, via a sidewalk, because there's gaps. And you'll see that all over kind of the metropolitan area, and certainly in Arapahoe County in certain locations. So that's why you see those gaps, essentially under undeveloped property.
Sorry, we're just conferring here because one of the questions is how does this impact on rezoning projects? And I think that was, when we rezone, how will this impact that development? And I think I'm a
bit confused what the question is in terms of rezoning.
Go ahead, Ron.
You want me to address it?
Yeah.
So I was just sharing with Commissioner Sharp that our zoning code currently requires compliance with the comprehensive plan on rezonings. And so this language, to the extent this is adopted by the comp plan, which I think it is, mm-hmm. So there is a nexus there. And so it does create, it's not just an advisory document necessarily, it does create a requirement. So my thought would be if there is concern about adopting these requirements at this time, that you might want to continue this matter for further review. But if there is no concern about that, then it would be appropriate to adopt the document.
Okay. And I'll, Brian, did you want to?
And you know, as my understanding was that the comp plan was the Planning Commission's document, and that the Board of County Commissioners can utilize that information or deviate from that information as they so choose in terms of rezonings and that sort of thing. Is that an incorrect understanding?
Yeah, there's currently some language in the Land Development Code which says that rezonings are to comply with the comp plan. So yes, that your understanding's, at least as to rezonings, is not correct. Okay.
Okay. So the way we looked at this as, here's some recommendations that would help in terms of land development as part of the policies of implementing the intent of the document. And with that, therefore, taking it toward that next step would be through the land development code, the engineering standard requirements updates to reflect what are the recommendations out of this plan relative to policy. And the biggest one, like we've talked about, is not creating barriers, right? A barrier would be a missing sidewalk, or we have a large street that would be going someplace, a crossing of that from a drainage perspective and not accommodating pedestrian facilities or a trail underneath that. It's a lot cheaper to build it when it's a brand new facility as opposed to the county having to come in and retrofit it to accommodate it. I think you've seen examples of that. Iliff and Highline Canal, Arapahoe Road, over Cherry Creek are very expensive projects if we have to retrofit. So it was identifying, let's coordinate that and become more of a complete streets program than just looking at it from a roadway perspective.
Right. And I agree with that. I think that, some of the older developments, and particularly commercial areas, but residential as well, didn't really, the sidewalks in some older areas are very narrow, not really appropriate for even two people to walk on side by side. It's difficult. So I agree with that. My concern was just as Mr. Carl said, it was on the requirements for rezoning, and I'll ask our board about that. But I did have one other on policy 14. It says Arapahoe County will encourage the desired land use pattern of compact development and a mix of uses described in the comprehensive plan that promote bicycle and walking for transportation purposes. And my question is that compact development doesn't necessarily apply to the rural area. And so how does this policy really relate to, I don't think we want to be sort of saying in the rural areas they got to have compact development. Is this more related to commercial, or should it say where appropriate or where applicable?
Why we defined it as the comprehensive plan, because that defines where those compact developments are recommended. That's why we identified it as a mix of use described in the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
So it goes back to those topologies that Ray referenced. So we have rural topologies, we have urban topologies. It's where it's appropriate. So certainly along the I-25 corridor, where we have light rail, where we have commercial development, where there's a lot of TOD going, that would be a topology that would encourage bike and ped movements. If you're looking at the rural area where we have 19-acre minimum lot size, probably doesn't really appropriate in that type of setting. But we would provide shoulders on the roadways from a safety perspective that then could double for bicycle access.
So what's in the so the way this would read is that it would be the comprehensive plan for that area would be referred to. I just don't want to force this compact development
I don't think
to
compact
be
development
in the rural area.
because the comp plan is really driving more of those type of developments are to occur.
Okay. I mean, there may be in the rural area where it's more of a commercial. There could be compact development, but I just don't want it to be too broad.
Yeah.
And
that's why we reference the comp plan with the strategy, just saying that, hey, if we have these type of uses, those type of alternative modes, I think, apply to those areas where other areas it may not necessarily apply.
Okay. And I'm sorry, one last question, and that is on Policy 12, Strategy 12.1, which is implement comprehensive campaign to educate. Will that be done? I think you said, Ray, that would be done in coordination with some of the other jurisdictions. I'm thinking an educational brochure or something that then would be all of the jurisdictions. I'm just concerned that we're not doing that for the whole county, because the cost would be that could be a shared cost. Is that kind of what you're thinking in this comprehensive campaign to educate community members?
Yeah, so, an example of that is we're working with some of the schools in Cherry Creek School District to map out safe routes to school for the kids, but we're only doing that for the unincorporated schools. So if the Cherry Creek schools in Aurora would like to do the same thing, we'll freely share that information, but we're not going to do that for them. We're going to develop and kind of take the lead as the lead organization to develop some of those outreach campaigns with Arapahoe County Sheriff and other agencies in unincorporated Arapahoe County. And then if other municipalities want to share that campaign or take that on in their own municipalities, they're more than welcome to do that. That's also referencing, how I said some of these municipalities want to do their own bike and pedestrian plans. That's also an element that they could just incorporate into their own, do that on their own. But no, it's not. We're not doing that for the entire county.
And I do think that might be an opportunity to work with the municipalities, though, because they're probably common issues, not where a specific bike lane is or location or what it looks like or something like that, but in terms of bike safety.
Sure.
I think that there's some real common elements that maybe bringing your group from open space folks together across the county you could look at something where there's some common elements that could go into a educational campaign. Just thinking it's a good opportunity, I think, to bring, and if we're trying to bring a countywide network together, it seems like this is a good opportunity to kind of keep that dialogue going between unincorporated and incorporated areas.
I completely agree with that.
Yes. And I think another partner that we've talked to, and that's the TMA, in terms of having that educational opportunity along the entire, at least in that area, the I-25 corridor, and how bike safety and interaction with different modes of travel work in that area. So that was another discussion that we've had. But I think the great example in what we've done already and what we're working on is with Cherry Creek schools. And performing bicycle audits with the schools, the principals, the communities around the schools that are dealing with parking issues and school drop-off and all of those, to come up with safety plans, and then developing safe routes to school maps that we're going to post on our website, and the schools will do as well. But those are unincorporated.
Sure.
And we're working right now with the Sheriff's Department as part of all of those things too. So I think that's where our educational opportunities begin.
Right. Okay. Thank you. You all did a wonderful job, Ray, just reaching out to all the communities, and the telephone town hall was amazing how many people we had call in with such an interest, and safety obviously was huge. And I think you've addressed a lot of these things in here. My only concern was on this policy 4 and 5 and probably a little bit on 6 on the requirements. So I will ask the board if they want to know, I think, more about this rezoning and the requirements that would then be on us for these would be required with rezoned parcels as well, or just go ahead and adopt this. Commissioner Jackson.
Yeah, I just want a kind of, for the record, a statement of clarity. That was a long conversation with lots of little tunnels and so on. So just as a clear statement, these policies will apply to whom and when?
So these policies will apply to developers when they are developing their properties. It won't apply to all developments. There are specific developments where we are requiring, like I said, those 83 or 93 development or arterial sidewalks. And that's arterial sidewalks. That's more in the, business corridors, not in really the residential areas. So yeah, it does. It sets these clear expectations that the developer will be responsible for this.
In other words, this is future looking rather than past.
Yeah, it's not retroactive. And there was a little bit of confusion too about the Planning Commission. This is sort of a three-headed thing here. So you have these policies that are incorporated into the comprehensive plan. So there's another document that these policies are referencing to give you that kind of idea of like what compact development is, where it is. And then there's also the adoption of it by the commissioners that, identifies the design guide and other aspects of the plan that are relevant as well. So it's kind of a synergistic thing between the Planning Commission, between what you guys are adopting, that make it all encompassing.
Commissioner Baker.
And I likewise have 2 questions. One is developments. Will this be retroactive to existing developments that they must come in compliance with this eventually, even if they were developed many years ago when this was not in effect?
I don't think so. I think this will only affect future developments.
It says renovated.
Yes, Ray is correct. I mean, if we've had a development come out and they're already built, it's difficult for us. We've assumed that responsibility if there's an enhancement that's needed. If it's undeveloped, and as soon as the land use code requirements and they come in under that current code, it would be whatever that current code requirements are. So right now it's what it is, and they either have to or don't have to build those. We do require sidewalk. We do require bike lanes. We do require the roadways to be improved. The statement is more about when they have to build those. So do we leave sidewalk to the very end, or do we ask for it up front? That's essentially where these policy differences are with regard to the recommendations that are being made.
Mr. Baker.
And so my next question kind of goes along with it, just because of the kind of blurriness, whether because I'm new to this but let's put a scenario forward that someone is building a building in Byers. Outside of Byers that were in Byers where they're building this for a single building. And I'm not sure if that constitutes a development under this, but under the comprehensive plan, everything that's required, such as what you said, sidewalks, bike lanes, if they're not already existing, that would be the responsibility of that business trying to either renovate a building in Byers or build a new building in Byers? See,
That's a difficult one to Byers in a rural area is real different. It depends on what type of development they have to go through. If it's a 35-acre parcel, we don't have any say at all because they're not going through a land use process that requires some action by the board. It's really more of an issuance of a building permit. If they have to go through a land development process where the board or the planning commission is approving that, it would be what is the design, what is the requirements of that area. You know, is building sidewalk in an area that nothing exists, you know, that would be somewhat of an issue, but we've identified maybe where sidewalk would be needed. Yes, they would have to build it along their frontage. And depending on where it is, if it's a I'll call it a use type of multifamily that would have then children that go to the school, it would probably be a partnership between that development and Arapahoe County to see how can we create that pathway. I think it's difficult to say you need to build the sidewalk off of your property to the school when you don't have any real connections there. When we're thinking about developments with this, it's more of that copper leafs. It's the Prospers where you have an overall design that would meet it. So does that help a little bit?
Yeah, it does help. Thank you.
And that's really, I just want to make sure that we don't force something that in a common sense standpoint doesn't make sense in that example, you know, but because it's now in our land development code, got to do it. But when we think about it in a practical context, doesn't make sense. So that's the problem because sometimes when we have something in a code, we say, oh, well, you got to do this. And then you kind of, you know, and other people are saying, well, why? You know?
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to.
There's also the flip side of that too. You know, when there's a new development that comes in that's multifamily and they can't walk to their corner store, why does the sidewalk not exist?
Yeah. But I mean, a sidewalk in front of one place and there are no sidewalks anywhere else and kids aren't walking to school.
Sure.
and things like that. I just want to make sure we don't remove the common sense from some of this too in our require.
And that's also
language.
where some of the context from the comprehensive plan comes into play too.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll have to look at some as we'll have to adopt these land development codes. This is the bike and ped plan, master plan, but we'll also adopt the land development code that goes with this. And so I think we'll just have to make sure that we've got the land development code and the comprehensive plan, that everything along the way is making that common sense, that it makes sense, bringing all those things together, and we're not forcing an urban requirement in the rural area or vice versa.
Yes, ma'am. We do
or
not.
Suburban. I mean, we're mostly suburban and rural. We say urban, but it's really mostly suburban and rural.
Correct.
That's what we are. So, Commissioner Conti.
Madam Chair, yes, I'm just reading under Policy 20, Strategy 20.1, I believe it's page 9, work with businesses in the Denver South Transportation Management Association to encourage installation of bicycle and pedestrian amenities. Example, secure bike parking, lockers, showers, bike maintenance stations when buildings are built and or renovated. I'm wondering, what is the level of renovation when it rises to the level that this has to be, this will be encouraged? If they simply do, tenant, they restructure interior dimensions, is that enough renovation, or do they have to do exterior renovations, or where's the line drawn?
So it's not clearly defined in here, but I would imagine that renovation would be pretty substantial. So how many, how much renovation are you doing? How many people are you adding? Is it going to be advantageous to put these in?
Renovations wouldn't necessarily mean that you're adding anybody. It could just be changing interior, and frequently it is. Tenant refinish, or even if you're restructuring to make your cubicles smaller, and therefore you're adding people, it's still just an interior refinish. So that's what I'm wondering. Where's the line drawn here?
There's really no line because this is not a recommendation. It's not a requirement that they do it. It's an encouragement
Yes.
that, hey, if you're looking at this, why don't you consider your employees and to provide these amenities is what the recommendation of this policy is. So it could be exactly what you talked about. It could be a major overhaul. It could be a brand new building. It's just trying to provide that enhancement for somebody who might be walking or riding, that they don't have to sit around in their gym clothes all day at work, and gives them that opportunity. And I think the businesses now are providing that. Arapahoe County is a leader in that, and we're providing those sorts of things in our different facilities. So I think the way we identified this is doing these little things could be an enhancement to it. So as we work with those different entities, the TMA is working with those areas, bringing businesses in. Hey, have you considered this? And is this something that you're willing to provide? It is not a requirement. Or would we say you have to do that as part of your building permit?
And I do understand. I do understand that I did read the word encourage.
So those are discussions that one can have with the businesses when they come in. We could have them too as part of our economic developments discussion.
I've also lived through, the planning department will say that they encourage, and when it filters down through the actual guy that's coming to my house to install the new water heater, he relays it as an absolute mandate. And, I've also experienced how it can get diluted when it comes down to the actual, person in the field. And so this is why I'm trying to drill down. A lot of times, what's the old thing we measure with a micrometer so that we can cut with a hatchet so that we can, anyway, you get it. Sometimes it kind of does dilute down by the time that we get down to in the field. And I just want to make sure that, this is becoming clear.
Okay, thank you. I apologize to everybody for asking so many questions, but I just want to make sure that we get this right because it's going to set policy here and for a long time, and I just want to make sure that we have everybody has an opportunity, and particularly me, delving into some of these questions, but thank you very much. Okay, are there any further questions, Mr. Nguyen? Okay, seeing none. This is not a public hearing, but I have two people that signed up, and Raylene. Welcome. Nice to see you again. 2 days in a row.
Yesterday, wasn't it?
Yep.
I'm Raylene Owen, and I am an equestrian and rode at the old fairgrounds, and now I'm chair of the steering committee at the new fairgrounds, speaking here today as a citizen. First, I do understand that this master plan originated as an alternate transportation project, and I recognize that not many people ride their horses to work anymore. But the omission of equestrian trails in this plan is pretty glaring. And although I know that Mr. Nguyen referenced that there is a sentence saying that equestrians are welcome in this plan, I have not read every word of the plan, but I have yet to find that, and I would appreciate it if you would show me that sentence in the plan later on. That would be wonderful. But I and others have addressed with staff and planners that this master plan does contain this omission of equestrian trails. And many of these trails, if not most of them, were actually made and are used by people on horseback, and we end up seeing them paved with, cement, and that they're no longer usable for equestrian uses. Equestrians do need soft surface, whether it is pressure fine or just plain dirt. Our trails are cheap to make as opposed to cement. And equestrians don't just live in the eastern end of the county. They stretch from, Columbine clear to our 70 miles east. By omitting equestrians in this, we have disenfranchised a lot of tax-paying citizens that especially are in the eastern end of the county. They are impacted by this, and it diminishes them more, as shown by the map that we had up here that doesn't even include land east of the Watkins Road. And that omits several thousand acres of open spaces that have been conserved that have a wonderful opportunity for trails for all users. I want to just quote from the summary of public input that is in this plan on page 3. There is a very brief reference to equestrian usage, and I quote, "A small," and I'm not sure how they calculated that it was a small group, "of public meeting attendees voiced their disappointment that equestrian facilities were not specifically called out in the draft work. The BPMP team explained to these citizens that the omission of the word equestrian was not intended to indicate that horses are not permitted on the trail system. Including verbiage within the plan, making this decision clear is something to be considered." Now, unfortunately, I have found nothing in the plan where this distinction is made clear. We're missing a great opportunity here, and a lot of times if something isn't made clear and is not said, yes, equestrians are welcome, people in wheelchairs are welcome, then they eventually get kicked to the curb. So we're missing out on a great opportunity, given especially the future connectivity of Triple Creek and all of that trail system and development of the trails of open spaces on the thousands of acres in the eastern end of the county. It's essential to have a map that includes all of the trails with all types of usage that go clear to, the 70 miles east. Another opportunity that's not mentioned and is not on the map is to use the Arapahoe County Fairgrounds and Park as a hub to connect these trails and use it as a staging area for users of these regional trails, and that's of all users. And the fairgrounds is actually in the direct middle of the county, and it is extremely popular and well used, and really does need to be included in this as a hub. Now, while I applaud the vision and scope of this plan and the work that has been done so far, I'm proposing that staff in collaboration with community members add equestrian trails to this master plan to ensure that everyone throughout the county is considered. I was told at these meetings also that the name bicycle pedestrian is misleading, especially since it's not just for them, as Mr. Wynn has said, although it does appear to be very bicycle driven. And they even suggested to me at one of the meetings that the name might be changed to include all trail users and not just a misleading, just these two groups. And as a pedestrian on a lot of these trails, the danger, I think, to pedestrians is more from speeding bikes than from automobiles. I just want to leave you with this quote from Thomas Jefferson, who said that majority rule, and in this case the bikers, majority rule may be oppressive also if it violates the equal rights of the minority. So thank you very much for listening to my comments on this plan.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, and I have John, and I think I'm going to Boybro. Did I pronounce that? I don't think I pronounced that right. Go ahead, John. If you state your name and address for the record.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is John Voboril with the City of Inglewood. I also am a resident of the City of Inglewood and the county at 4100 South Galapago Street. And I am here this morning to read to you a letter of support for the Arapahoe County Master Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan from Inglewood Mayor Joe Jefferson, approved by the City Council last evening at 10:30 p.m. Dear Commissioners, City of Inglewood citizens and staff members have participated in the development of the new Arapahoe County Master Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan. The Inglewood City Council is appreciative of this county's efforts to incorporate local plans into the larger vision for Arapahoe County and excited by the prospect of potential project funding through the Arapahoe County Open Space Program. A number of Inglewood projects scored very well. The Arapahoe County Master Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan has been reviewed closely in study sessions held by the Inglewood Planning and Zoning Commission and the Inglewood Transportation Advisory Committee. Both groups have endorsed the Arapahoe County Master Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan. On behalf of the Inglewood City Council, I, Joe Jefferson, Inglewood Mayor, endorse this letter of support for the adoption of the Arapahoe County Master Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan at the October 17th Arapahoe County Commissioners' regular meeting. And that is sincerely Joe Jefferson, City of Inglewood Mayor. And I will leave this letter with Ms. Sanchez.
And thank you very much. And if you would thank the mayor and city council, we really do appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on the Arapahoe County Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan? Okay. If not, any comments, questions from the board? How do we, at this point, if this master plan is adopted today, how do we address some of the issues? And I think you maybe pointed out where it says equestrian, but is that something that could be amended to this plan? Please.
So on the very first page in the introduction, it says, the plan considers both commuter and recreational uses and provides connectivity to and from major employment, recreation, educational, and transportation, transit, bus facility, all of which are considered activity centers. Although this plan does not specifically highlight equestrian users and uses, equestrians are allowed and encouraged to use all trails in Arapahoe County. That's on page 1. And then on page 34, where it talks about the existing facilities that are on it basically references this graphic. It said, Arapahoe County's trails serve a multitude of non-motorized users, in addition to bicyclists and pedestrians. Trails are used by wheelchairs, adult tricycles, recumbent bicycles, electric bicycles, inline skaters, scooters, skateboards, and equestrians, among others. Where equestrian activity is high, a separate bridle trail alongside a paved trail will be considered.
Okay. I'd rather have a horse than a skateboarder, but I'm just saying. Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Wynn or Commissioner Jackson?
I just want to echo the earlier words of Commissioner Holland and talk about the enormous amount of work that went into this plan, that all of the outreach, even going, so you went to bicycle shops, you didn't go to, horseshoers. I don't mean to make light of it, but, but nevertheless, I just want to say that you and your team put in an enormous amount of work, and it shows. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Baker.
I just wanted to say that in order to be marketable, developers don't build houses that they can't sell. They don't build communities that people don't want to move into. So a lot of these, I understand, are going to be voluntary in the first place. They're going to be part of the plan because it's just smart city planning or community planning to include amenities that will attract people to the development. But I think you said at the beginning the word require does place more of a, and as Commissioner Conti described, a lot of things that start out in our plan as a recommendation or an encouragement, somehow by the time they get down to where the rubber meets the road or where the hot water heater is being installed or where the pedestrians are walking or the equestrians are leading their or riding their mount, is that that's the language I think that there is some concern about. And I'm on part of a committee that looks at buildings downtown for Dr. Cog and how many of them do have locker space and places for bicycles and showers for people to wash up after going on a ride or coming in to work. It's amazing. And I just don't think that those standards that we see in downtown Denver or downtown Littleton or downtown Englewood always translate well into the rural community. And so as long as we're understanding that there's a level of discretion on the part of our planners and on the part of our staff, a level of flexibility to work with people rather than to mandate, to always dictate it has to be this way or the highway, then I'm okay with that. And I understand that it's three parts. It's the comprehensive plan, the zoning and land use code, and then it's this master plan.
Correct.
I also want to say FHU did a great job. I went to many of the charrettes, I guess they're called, the community interaction, and I did hear a lot of equestrians saying that it should be in the title, because I think you've got the big three there, basketball, baseball, and football, kind of analogy, but you've got bicycles, pedestrians, and equestrians here in Colorado, the western part of the United States, and specifically in eastern Arapahoe County. Thank you.
Do you want to add that to the title?
Should we make that? I'll just kind of ask my fellow board members if it's that important. Shouldn't it be part of the title?
Is there anything wrong with putting bicycle, pedestrian, and equestrian master plan?
I mean, are you opening the floodgates, though, for what about the skateboarders? What about the inline skaters? What about the single ball roller skaters? What about the hoverboards that aren't even invented yet? I mean, no other open spaces department in Colorado has an equestrian trail plan.
Okay.
So I have I had an idea, but I decided not to say anything because this is a public hearing. But it seems to me that the trails that equestrians prefer they're not special in the sense, but they are soft trails and they have certain requirements. And I'm wondering if at some point in time, and again, I'll talk to you offline about some ideas for doing something like that. That would be its own kind of guide for equestrians in Arapahoe County, which I think would be really cool. And then I think the idea of using the fairgrounds as a hub for that and so on and so forth would be great. I think that the emphasis, as was mentioned, of this is pedestrian and bicycles. That is the emphasis for this. Doesn't mean that equestrians and wheelchairs and skateboards aren't allowed, but it really is meant, it's not the skateboarder's guide to Arapahoe County, it's bicycles and pedestrians, and yeah, y'all, the rest of you come on too. So I think if we want a focused, detailed mapping study of equestrian trails, that would be a very cool project for something. So.
Yeah, because part of that too is okay, you have a place for equestrians to ride, but are they riding to there? You know, do we have to provide parking standards for that? They're bringing their trailers. You know, whether you're a skateboarder or an equestrian, you want to be on a hard surface for a skateboard, a soft surface for an equestrian. We've identified where those surfaces are. We just created the entire bicycle and trail map. Notice it doesn't say bicycle and walkers. It says trail because that serves many users for all of Arapahoe County, and it identifies hard surface and soft surface trails. So as a user, you can say, oh, I would like to be on a skateboard on this hard surface trail, or I would like to be an equestrian and use this soft surface trail. There's a whole map that shows you all of the little connections and all of the intricacies of the soft surface and hard surface trails.
Well, I would suggest to move us on that we go ahead and vote on this, and then we have a separate study session that talks about equestrian opportunities and how that might fit into, and it could certainly reference this plan, but if there are other things, and really hear from the equestrian community, and I do think that there are equestrians in a number of our cities here on the western side of the county, and certainly equestrians on the eastern part of our county. So maybe let's separate the two and go forward with this. So if there are no further questions, I'll entertain a motion. Oh, anybody have the motion?
I didn't see it.
I have. Commissioner Baker.
In light of that, that's acceptable to me if we do kind of maybe call out the equestrians and maybe put that in a separate document or process to just let them know how important we believe their recreational opportunities are to us as well. But I move to adopt the Arapahoe County Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan as presented during the public hearing on October 17th, 2017.
Is there a second? Motion made by Commissioner Baker, seconded by Commissioner Jackson. If there are no further comments, questions, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Thanks again. Sorry for all the questions. But
Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you so much for your support and your time.
Okay, we're going to move on to public hearing case number U17-003 Wolf Creek Solar. And our presenter is Diane Kosis, case planner, Public Works and Development. And our attorney is Mr. Robert Hill, Senior Assistant County Attorney. Mr. Hill, would you set the foundation, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This matter is for use by special review for a solar power plant on agricultural property. It has been noticed by mailing and publication. I'm told it's been fully noticed by posting as required by our code, but I understand the Form B affidavit attesting to how long it's been posted and where has been misplaced. So I believe the board has jurisdiction to proceed, though I would like the applicant to make representation of that posting on the property for how long and where it was posted. And then after the hearing, I would like to make sure we get the Form B located and put into the record.
Thank you, Mr. Hill.
So we can proceed with that understanding.
Morning, Commissioners. The applicant, Wolf Creek Solar, and the property owner, Strasburg Sanitation and Water, are requesting approval of a use by special review, case number U17-003, for a solar power plant. The solar power plant has a proposed capacity of 10 megawatts on approximately 80 acres located southwest of the intersection of County Road 6 and North Piggott Road in eastern Arapahoe County, which is approximately 1.75 miles northeast of Bennett. Staff and the Planning Commission are recommending approval with 5 conditions of approval. Are there any questions before I introduce the applicant's representative? Michelle Zimmerman, the applicant's representative, will now provide a brief project summary.
Zimmerman, hi. If you would just state your name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, let me find the... Yes, thank you. Great. Good morning, Commissioners. Michelle Zimmerman, address 325 North French Street, Breckenridge, Colorado, 80424. Thanks so much for having me here today. As you know, I was here before you about, I think a month or 6 weeks ago on the Bennett Solar, and we went through, my colleague Jeff Weber was here and went through a very elaborate technical explanation of a lot of the questions that often come up on these large-scale, utility-scale solar projects. So I've reduced the size and content of my presentation because you've already been fully educated on all those technical components. So this is for the Wolf Creek Solar. As Diane said, thank you. It is just south of Strasburg. And again, we spoke last time about Cypress Creek Renewables. Just again, we're a company founded in 2014. We focus specifically, or not specifically, but majority on utility scale, large scale solar developments. So projects where we have the one customer, and that customer is the utility. So the goal is working with utilities to bring distributed solar to local communities. Again, we went through the solar basics, so I just have the one slide here talking about the engineering, the permits, some of the safety, just to reiterate what we're going through this process, going through the land use permitting process, and then, of course, we'll be going through any kind of building and electrical permitting process. Any kind of engineering, we've been working closely with the planning engineering team as well through this project. So specifically, we'll jump right into the Wolf Creek project. Here's a vicinity map. You'll see, just south of the town of Strasburg. The parcel here is 100 acres. Our current layout, our current design takes up about 65 acres of that 100 acres. We currently have it located a little bit off of County Road 6, south of County Road 6, and off of Piggott Road, mainly because we have the opportunity, we have the space with 100 acres to try to get it away from that right-of-way, away from that view shed as much as possible. So that's why you'll see it not pushed up against the edges as much as possible. We're looking at also an 8-foot tall chain link fence. If you recall, we spoke about that last time as well. That chain link fence being 8 foot tall, we did that because of conversation with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and them wanting a larger, taller fence with no wires on top to make sure that any of our big game population or ungulate species aren't going to get caught in those wires or separated from one another. This is proposed as a single axis tracker. You'll see some projects are fixed tilt where they just face south. This is a single axis tracker where you have the racking which goes into the ground like a fence post running north-south, and then the panels rotating, facing east in the morning, rotating about that axis throughout the day, facing west in the afternoon. Our customer is the utility Rural Mountain Electric Association, and power output we're looking at right around offsetting about 2,200 homes is the equivalent of, on average, how much power this is expected to produce. This is our layout. As you can see, we tried to move it off of County Road 6 as much as possible. Again, there's that water pipeline that goes from across the northwest portion of the property. So we tried to stay away from that so that the landowner could, of course, access that water line. That's one of Strasburg Water and Sanitation District's pipelines. So they want to make sure they can access that. There is a landowner on the northeast corner there, right, I guess it would be right on the southwest of Piggott and, oh, sure. Perfect. All right. So we spoke with this landowner early on, and he had asked, our original design had it a little further north, and he had asked if we could move it further south. So we took a look if we could redesign, and we were able to do that. So that was nice. One of the things we spoke about last time as well was our community outreach. We do send out letters to all of the adjacent property owners before we ever even submit the application to the county to try to get as much input as possible from all of the neighbors. We really want to make sure that these things are designed with the community in mind. And then again, of course, per the rules, we do a public notice to all of the adjacent properties for both the Planning Commission and Board of County Commission. So we are trying to do everything we can to make this blend in or work with the community where possible. One of the ways we're doing that also on that chain link fence is we've offered, and this is up for conversation, to do privacy slats that you'll see around a lot of the substations for around on the fencing where it's anywhere where it's visible from the right of way. That's something we can certainly do, or if there's other suggestions, if you want green privacy slats or wooden or something like that, we can certainly talk more about that. Some photos just to show what a single axis tracker would look like. These are, I believe, Eastern Oregon, so kind of similar topography and landscape, not exact, but that high desert grassland kind of idea. Just a quick run through of the local benefits that a distributed large-scale solar facility can bring, allowing the landowner to maintain their ownership of their land. We're doing a lease with a landowner. The term is an initial 20-year term with an additional up to 20-year extension. After that time, once the facility has been decommissioned, that land goes back to its original use. So that's a nice thing. It doesn't have a significant impact to the land. Increased tax revenue for Arapahoe County, helps IREA, the Intermountain Rural Electric Association, fulfill their needs for renewable energy, and then always, diversifies our electrical mix, which, as we continue to grow as a nation, is something that's good for all of us. Economic benefits, we'll be bringing about 23 full-time jobs, local full-time jobs during construction into the community. We're looking at about $3.5 million of direct spending, so that's trucks, landscaping, hotels, food, that kind of thing. And then 1 to 2 full-time employees for operations and maintenance too. Of course, we make our money when this thing produces, so we don't want it sitting out there idle. And that's it. Tried to keep it short and sweet. Certainly welcome any questions.
Okay, questions? Commissioner Jackson.
Yeah, it's about the view. I'm sitting here with one of the photos you supplied us, which is a beautiful view of the prairie, right? And so I'm thinking about these 8-foot slats and what that looks like. Is this going to be somewhat, am I going to drive by and see a huge just fence with green or blue or whatever?
Yeah, pink camouflage.
Bronco colors, I don't care. But some kind of slats, is that what it's like those metal things that are woven in the chain link?
That's what privacy slats are, but if you notice,
So what is, I'm just kind of curious what that looks like.
If you're driving on County Road 6, our fence will be down here. Our fence is as close to the array as we can make it. The reason we have the fence is National Electric Code, because it is high voltage in there.
Well, you got to have a fence.
Yeah, but
I totally get that.
We don't want any more of the fence than we have to have, of course, because we want to make sure that if the rest of that land wants to be farmed, or again, if animals want to be able to migrate. Okay. And then this is Pickett Road. So
there's some distance there.
There's distance there. So as you're driving up and down the road, of course, as you know, in the Eastern Plains, 10 feet and a mile are kind of the same. So, and then the privacy slats, if you've driven by, if you can imagine one of the substations, I think most of those are 7-foot fences with green privacy slats. So I don't know if you can imagine.
Yeah. I'm just thinking that, planting trees out there would be kind of ridiculous, because you'd have to water them and all that. So, I guess that's the best you can do, but I just was curious if you had a photo of it.
I can navigate and pull one up probably.
I could probably Google it, right?
Yeah, if you, okay. Substation in Arapahoe County, I don't know, image.
Thank you.
Sorry. Good morning. So your community outreach, and you mentioned talking to the owner there at the northeast, and I believe that was the closest property owner in the vicinity of this proposed site. Is that correct?
That was the closest. However, these two properties here and here are also the, I have a, let's see if I can,
yes.
So this is
rough.
This is me in Google Earth, and the ruler. So this is from our facility to the house, not to the property line.
Right.
This is probably more like 500 feet to the property line. And then again here, our original design came all the way up to there, which made this home much closer. Now it's 700 feet. Our original design, it was the closest property.
Okay.
And now in this design, these two are closer.
Thank you. And what other comments did you receive?
I've spoken with Cheryl Miller, the landowner here, and she also was at our planning commission meeting, which is great. The concerns there have been about the view shed. Of course, when you're, as you guys know, on the Eastern Plains, when you're looking west, especially at sunset, that's the view. And so her property is about 10 feet higher in elevation than the project site, which out there is enough. So as she's looking out at the western view, that solar is going to be right at the bottom of her view. And I do have a visual rendering of that if you want me to pull that up.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to see that.
I think I have it. I think I added it to I think it's right here. Oh, yes. So this is a photo that Mrs. Miller supplied. I think this is probably from her front yard. And this is just a visual rendering, of course, not. You can see we kind of tried to throw the green privacy slats in the fence, but it's sort of a pasted down. And yeah, when you're 10 feet higher than the site, you're going to see it. And so that's why we wanted to do a photo simulation specifically for those closer neighbors.
Go ahead, Commissioner Baker.
I had a couple of other questions. The owner is Strasburg Sanitation and Water District. What is their, what kind of is that a private company? Is that a utility?
Yeah, it's the water and sanitation utility for the town of Strasburg.
Okay, and so they don't pay property taxes, do they?
No, they currently do not. So if you pull up their certificate of taxes, I believe they are tax exempt. I believe that the zoning of it is Ag 1, but they are a tax exempt municipal utility. Yeah.
So you said that one of the benefits of having this project would be increased taxes to Arapahoe County. Mm-hmm. Where would those increase?
Because we're putting a commercial facility, so we're going to be assessed at the state level for our personal property.
Okay, and is there any in the lease? Have you already executed the lease with the owner? Okay. So are there provisions in that lease that they won't be paying that at increased?
Yeah, I think that's Section 9 or something of the lease. Yes, absolutely. It's very clear in all of our ground lease agreements that the property taxes associated with our facility versus the property taxes associated with any of their land are separate. And then the land underneath our facility, for example, at Bennett, Mr. Van Dyke, the owner there, would not be responsible to pay real property taxes, not personal property, but the real property taxes on those acres underneath our panels that we're leasing. We're responsible for that tax bill.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. I just had, Ms. Zimmerman, would you talk about the posting, where it was posted and how long?
Yes, and I apologize. The sign was posted, and I did Form A. So there's 3 forms that go in for these meetings, both for the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commission meeting. One form is the mail certification that I certify, yes, indeed, I sent all the letters to all the landowners as required. One is the Form A, which is a photograph of the sign where it's posted and then a legal description of the property. I did submit that the day when it was posted back on September 19th, which was the day of our Planning Commission meeting. And so I submitted that, and then there's a Form B that you have to certify that it's been up for 30 days. Well, 30 days was yesterday. And I actually did go through Byers, through Strasburg yesterday because I had an event in Byers. So I can say that I do know that the sign was up yesterday, and I just did not get a chance to get it notarized. So that Form B is a legal description, and it says to me, it says that it's been up for 30 days from September 17th to today. And then I sign and get that notarized. And I have that form ready to go, and I can go get it notarized and submit it right after this meeting.
Could you maybe, on the site plan, show where the posting was, or the sign was posted?
Is it better to go here? I guess either one. So it is posted, so there's coin. It's posted right here.
Okay, thank you.
Right on County Road 6. Because our property doesn't abut Piggott Road, so we don't have any rights. I mean, I suppose we could put it right at our drive there, but since the property that we're leasing does abut County Road 6, we posted it there.
That's fine. And if you could just complete the Form B and.
Yep, it's ready to go. Like I said, there's three forms, and that one, fortunately, I did have that event in Byers, so I was able to go through yesterday, so that was good.
Okay. So what's the construction time?
On this project, it's a 10-megawatt project, and our construction time is about 3 to 4 months for 10 megawatts.
And when would it start?
So we are this is now looking at a 2019.
If this is approved, sorry, I should have said that.
If this is approved as proposed, the construction timeline as a Q2 2019, so would probably start in Q3, let's say June of 2018.
June of 2018, okay. And I had somewhere in here that this total property was 132.
Yeah, I think
acres.
I think if I pull, our lease says up to 100 acres. So I think the parcel itself is 132. We knew we would need at least 100 acres. So how we typically do these when we go to a landowner, if you own 500 acres and we know we're going to need about 70 or 80 of those, but we don't know exactly where on that 500 acres we're going to put it until we do our environmental, our wetlands, our state historical, all of those analyses, those critical issues. Then we'll say, okay, the best place for this is going to be here. So when we do our initial lease, we say up to 500 acres. And then when we sign the lease, we execute our lease area. It's surveyed, and we attach the survey of that 80 acres that we actually end up using.
So you'll have 80 acres, but the arrays themselves will be on 65 of the 80 acres? I'm trying to understand because I have 100 acres, 65 acres, 80 acres. I'm just trying to figure out.
Yep, and a lot of that is we want to have enough flexibility so that if you guys say, you know what, hey, we actually want your panels up here or something like that, we have the room. We haven't constrained ourselves too early. So if someone comes to us and says, hey, we found a burial site right there. We've got to move things around. We have the flexibility to do that.
Could you go on the other side of the water line there to put some in the...
Yep, we certainly could. Couple of concerns with doing that is if the landowner wanted to continue to farm any of their property, having as much continuous area for farming as possible, and that's a nice, obviously being able to get to that pipeline, that's a nice big area if they did want to continue to use that property for any other purpose.
And I'm just thinking from the people who are across the road to the east. That
and then it's
moving it a little bit.
People here, so I don't know which is better. Like I say, we did this out of a desire if the landowner wanted to continue to use any of the property, it would be good to have a continuous. But there's nothing environmentally or that restricts us from putting panels up here. We can certainly look at that.
I had a question for our assessor just on the property tax, because we are getting a number of, I mean, you all were here and we've had a number of other solar companies who've wanted to be in the eastern part of our county, and so I'm just wondering if you can give us an idea of how property is assessed. So it's agricultural assessment, and now it's going to this commercial.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why we're here. These are coming to Arapahoe County in a very big way. We have some small ones, but a lot of these 10 megawatt and even a 75. I think you guys have a 75 watt coming. Those are all state assessed, so the Division of Property Taxation will value those and allocate them to us. But they're struggling right now with how to value those. Our people are meeting with the state next week to talk about this very thing and how they're going to be valued, what responsibility we have for land or possessory interest if it's tax-exempt land, government-owned. So that's what we're working out with them now. What we do know, one of our questions to them was, is this like oil where it could spike based on production and then taper down? Is it like a pipeline that comes out high and every year goes straight down as it depreciates? It sounds like these are going to be valued based on capacity. And as long as that capacity doesn't change, the tax would be a fairly steady, stable income stream. So it could be, a positive attribute for this part of the county. But we won't know until the state finalizes some of their values. This won't come online in 19, construction in 18. The smaller ones now that are 2 megawatts and under, we do locally. And we'll do those combination of personal property and land value. And so right now we're grappling. We've been working with Ben Schwartzendruber in the county attorney's office. There is a law that says for these alternative energy sites that when those are developed, the assessor is prohibited from changing the classification of that land. So if it was developed on ag land, we have to leave it as ag. Although the use becomes somewhat commercial and it's no longer qualifies for ag. So we are working through that with county attorney's office, with the Division of Property Taxation, with Cypress Creek Renewables, all the information we can. So we are cataloging, inventorying all of these sites that are coming up, trying to get our arms around what that's going to mean to the county in terms of tax dollars, because a lot of these, will not come anywhere near the cost to put them in. So that, we'll keep you apprised as we find out. Unfortunately, it's new enough. Adams County may have 1 or 2 we can look at. The DPT has called us for help, and we've called them for help, so I'm sure we'll figure it out.
So, Mark, from what you're saying is, since the state does the assessment on these large facilities, is it possible that the local government would not share in those revenues and they would all go to the state and there'd be no sharing with the local?
No, it should go 100% to us. Our position is somewhat that if the facility is 100% in Arapahoe County and the substation is in Arapahoe County, then when they apportion the value, 100% of it stays in Arapahoe County. Is this a substation next to you, or is that just the line?
The substation is right. Actually, we'll be on the northeast. We'll be going into that substation up there.
So you're still in Arapahoe County?
Yes.
Because the state would also centrally assess public service company, IREA, that sort of thing. But I don't think they'll be allocating those revenues any differently. This should be allocated be 100%. it would be similar to the pipeline that starts in Douglas County and goes to Adams. The whole thing might be $20 million. The portion in Arapahoe is what we get. And then Douglas gets a little and Adams gets a little. So we think these will be the same way, except they should be so small and self-contained, we should get 100% of them if they're totally in our county. So the state should not be taking any of that money, I don't believe.
I'm just curious because, severance tax and that kind of thing is you have the facility in your county, but unless the workers live there in your county, so you have the truck traffic and you have everything else, but now there's property tax, but the severance tax part of it may not come to the county if people don't live in the county that work there. So it just is just trying to figure out, because it is becoming, it concerns me. I think because we are getting a lot of these, there's certainly a way of life in the rural part of our county and visual impacts and other things that if we get a lot of these going to change that character. And I'm concerned about that too. And so anyway.
I agree, and we're looking at every aspect. Once the state really figures out how they're going to value them and we can see what the impact is on us fiscally, that'll be one side. But we're also looking at, does it affect adjacent property owners? Does it affect anything? We're looking at pros and cons.
Right.
When you put a development like this, there could be some impact, positive, negative.
What's the impact on adjacent neighbors?
So we'll look at all of that, and we're starting to study these very carefully. Cypress has been very forthcoming. We've met with them. They've been very good to work with so far, and they're very transparent. So.
Is there any historical information from solar sites that have been there for a long time that, because this is not, maybe some of the technology is newer, but there have been solar panels in various sites for a long time. And is there any, I don't know if you all have any historical information on the impacts to residential properties?
We've looked into that, and I know Cypress does on the East Coast. They have existing facilities in
14 different states. North Carolina,
Oregon,
Indiana, Michigan, Florida.
Nothing we have seen here jumps out. There's appraisal literature on the impact of solar panels. A lot of it relates to the traditional on the single-family residential roof. We also have some small solar facilities on DIA, that sort of thing. Nothing you can measure yet. But we'll have to. And we will keep you posted as we find out.
Yeah.
At this point, we have not seen anything negative. That's all I can tell you.
Okay. Any other?
A couple other.
Ms. Zimmerman, go ahead.
So my understanding from Division of Property Taxation is that the state does the valuation and they pass that valuation to the county, and then the county does the invoicing or however you might.
Right. This would be similar to a lot of state assessed. I think we have 208 state assessed parcels. Everything from public transportation to pipelines and that sort of thing. So this will just be another one that we will get. Bill Kowalski is the individual at the DPT that will be responsible for this. And we expect once they settle on a methodology to value these, they'll all be done the same. So we shouldn't be in a disadvantage or advantage with any of the other counties that these are popping up in. But Arapahoe County has a lot of them coming down the pipeline.
And then with regard to property values, the we have an appraiser from American Valuation Partners who has done a full report on the Wolf Creek and the Bennett project. I have forwarded that to Diane. I also have one copy here that I can pass around. I also have Jason Carr from Cypress Creek Renewables here who can speak a little more to historical, both property taxation as well as neighboring valuation, if that's of interest.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, and if you just state your name and address for the record, please.
Sure. Jason Carr, Director of Community Relations for Cypress Creek. My address is 1441 Northeast Hudspeth Road, and that's Prineville, State of Oregon. So as Michelle mentioned, we have been developing in about 15 different states. North Carolina is really one of the states in the nation that has the most amount of current development that has actually been on the ground operational for upwards of 5, 7, even 10 years. There are there's a lot of information out there that you can tell through match pairs analysis, projects that have been built in rural areas on farmland that have been built next to residential subdivisions in more suburban areas, and also some smaller projects like on the 2 to 5 megawatt that are actually on or next to golf courses near high-end homes. So there's a lot of information in the state of North Carolina. Now, it's not a direct apples-to-apples comparison in the sense that the geography, as you can imagine, in a state like North Carolina is different from Colorado. That is why I've actually been leading the effort for our company nationwide to hire appraisers and experts in each local market. And I've done this in Oregon, worked with Michelle here in Colorado, doing it in Illinois, Michigan, and New York. So those are the states that I have worked in. Not all of those states have the amount of development where you have that history of 5 to 10 years. But collectively, what we are hearing from most appraisers is that there's no evidence to show that somebody who lives next to a solar panel has seen a precipitous drop in their property values. The issue, as you will see in this report, is there's a lot of subjectivity around it. So you may have, let's say, if you're selling your home, you may have 5 potential buyers that are looking at a house. And 2 of them right away will say, I don't want to live next to us. I don't care about what the house looks like, property. I just don't want to live next to a solar farm. The other 3 may not care. So, part of it is a little subjectivity involved, but what we've tried to do is provide some data to show in these markets what the impact has been. So what we're doing in a state like Colorado, in my home state of Oregon, where these developments are fairly new, is that we are engaging with these appraisers, having them do an initial assessment of what they believe is the issue, and then as we develop and as these projects come online and they have a couple of years where there's sales that have occurred around them, we will have them go back and do reporting and see what the outcome is in some of these new states. But going back to a state like North Carolina, and we can provide that report to you if you're interested in looking at it. There's a lot of data, a lot of history there to show that there has not been a negative impact in that state.
Questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions from Ms. Zimmerman? Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you. This is a slightly different line, and that is I noticed in the report there's quite a discussion of the abandoned oil and gas wells and pipelines in this area. And I find that actually fascinating given the controversy over whether or not the state is going to be tracking all of those in the state. But nevertheless, it sounds like you've done your due diligence and aren't going to be finding any gas lines that are full of gas and are going to explode on you there. But I'm wondering, in that same regard, we were just talking about home values and so on, what is the distance between the proposed solar farm and the nearest house? In Colorado, I believe it's got to be 750 feet to 1,000 feet for an oil well. And I'm wondering I don't think we have any rules for solar farms, but I'm wondering what the distance is.
Certainly, in that report from American Valuation Partners, that the full appraisal report specific to this project, this is addendum E that I happened to grab to take notes on conveniently. Looks like page 47. The closest home is number 5, 525 feet, and number 5 is from right at, where's the access road? Access road is there, so it's right here. So it's this home that's here. That's 525 feet, and some of those rules, obviously, with oil and gas. The nice things about solar, if you recall from Jeff Weber's presentation, there's no noise, there's no view, there's no pollution, there's no.
So the folks that live 500 feet away, have you talked to them about this? And
I've only spoken with Miss Miller, who is just south of that property owner. I have sent letters, and I have not heard from them. I'm obviously, I'm more than happy to speak with any, like I said, I've sent letters. I've put my phone number and email in those, and would love to work with any community neighbors to make sure that this is as positive as possible.
Okay, I have a strong suspicion that we may hear from a neighbor soon. So, thank you.
Great. Further questions? Okay, thank you. If not, I'll open the public hearing, and I have Jack and Nancy Kellogg, who would both like to speak. So,
want me to take this? Okay, great.
And the way, and I should have said this earlier, the way this works is we have about 3 minutes, and you'll see this yellow light come on up here right in front of me, and when it does come on, then you can, if you wouldn't mind, just wrapping up your comments. But if you'd state your name and address for the record, please.
It's 655 North County Road, 153, Strasburg.
Okay, and you are Jack Kellogg.
I'm Jack. I'm not real. I didn't know I could speak when I come in, but our concern is we're right on the corner across from the house that they moved the solar plant for.
Okay.
We're right across the street.
So
we're right on the corner,
the
northeast corner.
Okay.
Okay. So
yeah.
Our concern is out of our.
Have that map? I'm sorry. Can we put that map back up? Just make sure that I'm not going to take time away from you, but
okay.
If we can put the map, just make sure that we know.
Okay. We haven't had a chance to get to any of the meetings.
No, I'm glad you guys made it. Go ahead. I will pull it up here.
Okay. Well, our concern is out our back window we can see Pikes Peak, and I don't know if it's going to block our view or not. Sort of a selfish reason, I guess. But and then the other factor.
The green makes that point.
Okay, we're the furthest. What do I hit? Oh, the green.
The green.
Okay,
yeah.
so we're that one right there.
Okay.
Right on the corner. It's on the very corner. Right there.
Right and there. So the back of your house faces.
It's like a necktie shape. We butt up against the substation.
Okay.
So it's right on the corner. Value of property. I don't think we set up, I don't know, an 8-foot fence. I don't know if we can see over it or not. We might be able to see. I guess we got that diagram, but we didn't pay that much attention. And if that's where it's going to be, we might be okay. If they can move it into that field, then we're not going to be able to see the mountain range.
I see.
Because we don't.
My question of maybe helping people to the east would impact you all as you try to look south toward. Is that what? Just clarify.
Yeah, we're looking southwest out of our kitchen window. We put our house on an angle so we could see the mountain range.
Okay.
So that was one of our main concerns. And then the height of the fence. And I guess I'll let Nancy, she's got some other things written down, but that's our main objective, because if you can't see the front range from your house windows, then somebody that likes the house is not going to really want it if they want to see the range, and that's one of the reasons why we put the house in the, it isn't square with the road, if you know what I mean. We put it on an angle. So anyway, that's where we're at.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Ms. Kellogg, if you'd just state your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Nancy Kellogg, 655 North County Road, 153. It's Piggott, but it's 153 at the time. Like Jack was saying, we're right there on the very corner of that property. It looks, we're right next, our property line sits right next to the substation. And all those are 5 acres across where the top part there on that road across from where we're talking about. Our concern is our property value. Is there any, we don't know enough about the paneling. Is there going to be danger? Because that's the first thing everybody was saying. We were close to the substation that, our property value would go down too there. So, but when the whole field, it's an agricultural area. They've had wheat in there for the last 6 or 7 years in there. They've leased it out to a farmer. And so we're just concerned about that. And, will they continue moving the rest of it and filling the rest of that area in with, and how tall are these panels? Those are some of the things I wrote down. And I think that's about it. We're just.
Great. Well, thank you.
We have a beautiful view, and we just don't want to lose it because we can see Pikes Peak straight out of my kitchen window, and that's why we bought the property.
Understand. Great. Thank you, and we'll get the answers. I wrote down those. And Ms. Zimmerman, let me see if is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak? Yes, ma'am. Come on down. And if you just state your name and address for the record.
My name is Cheryl Miller. My address is 212 County Road 153. I'm just directly east of the proposed solar farm. My concern is my property value. I'm the one that sits higher than anybody else does. Everyone else is pretty much parallel to the solar farm, so if they put a fence up, you really couldn't see when the panels rotate, I suppose you might see the top of them. Mm-hmm. But I look directly down into the solar farm. My other concern is there's 3 other parcels there, one to the south, the west, and the southwest that are zoned A1 that are farmed. And my concern is that they will be expanded to those 3 parcels. What are the chances of that happening? Which would further affect my property value. If you guys decide to approve this solar farm, I would like a condition that I can work with Michelle and come up with a plan for privacy from my house onto the view, whether it's on my property to plant something to block the view. I would really love to have really tall evergreens right in front of them down on that proposed property, but I know they'll die because there's no water down there. And that's what I have. I'm really just concerned about the property value. We've lived there for 23 years, and we've expanded the house. We wish to retire in a couple years, sell the property, and move to be closer to my granddaughter. So, thank you.
Great. Thank you. Excuse me. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. And Ms. Zimmerman, could you address some of the issues from Ms. Miller, the view and screening, and we talked about property values, but and expansion. I think that was the other question to south of her property and
then how tall are they and expansion?
Yeah.
Okay. So for Mrs. Miller, I'm going to go back to her rendering that we did. Come on, there it goes. So as you'll notice, 8 feet tall is about, I know we don't have a lot of corn in eastern Arapahoe County, but it's about as tall as a cornfield. So if you're thinking about, the 8 feet tall isn't going to be right in front of your face. It's at a distance. So you are going to be able to look over it, as you can see in this visual rendering. It's in the view for sure, but it's not completely blocking. So as far as tall goes, the 8 feet there. Happy to work with Mrs. Miller on screening. Agree. Even if we put trees down right in front of the proposed array there, where that kind of light green is, even if we put trees there, I don't know that it would. I don't know that they would grow, even if we, did water them. And I don't know that it would necessarily, because it's so far away. You might, even if we had trees right there, you might still be able to see the solar back there. You know what I mean? So I don't know if maybe. Trees here might work, but I'm happy to work with the Millers on that. And then expansion was the other question. Right now, our plans go back to, that's actually maybe a decent one. So right now, this is 10 megawatts with IREA, and as Mark Scott mentioned, we have with the Bennett project that came before you. We have a 75-watt project that's been submitted. So right now we are looking at additional projects, but not on this site. So the chances of this area expanding, we don't have that in our business plan or strategy to expand this site. I can't say never. You can say, I think I'm going to live in a 1,000 square foot house forever, but someday you might want 1,200 square feet. So I don't have any plans for expansion of this site. That doesn't mean it can't be done.
And it would same process, become before a public hearing?
Yeah. No, this is the limit of what we're asking for today.
Okay. I guess the other question, and that your other photograph with the diagonal for the water line. Yeah. So I had asked about on the other side, yes. And your comment was keeping it, which sort of addresses the Kellogg's question about view corridors. If you keep it to the south of that water line, that should address their issue. But again, I probably ask you to meet with them and go to their property and do kind of simulations similar to what you've done here. That seems like meeting with them would be a good thing. And then I don't know, our approval, I'm assuming, Bob, would be for the whole site, or how do we, would they be required to come back if they move to the others? Because it would have different impacts.
Yes.
I think if they move to the other north side of that water line, it would change the some of the people to the north up there who may not be here today and don't have an issue might be concerned if it moved closer.
I think what's been presented shows the site and that specific location. Okay. So the board's approval is to that specific location.
Okay.
If they wanted to expand or modify, that would take an amendment to.
Okay, so they have to come back.
Yes.
Okay, I think that's good. Let me see if there was electrical current, I think was the other. We talked about height of panels and any electrical. I think you all talked about that last time you were here, and I think you mentioned it as well. But there's a substation that's going in, but any other impacts? You said there's no noise, and any
leakage, nothing to pollute.
From an environmental standpoint, anything that the neighbors should be concerned about?
Is all under National Electric Code. IREA does all of the interconnection studies, and we bring all of the power to a point of interconnection, and then IREA takes it from there into their substation.
Okay.
So it's all at Intermountain Rural Electric Association's standards and National Electric Code standards. I don't know if that addresses the question.
And I think on the land itself, or on where the solar panels are, there's no, you have to transmit the power, but
it's all
substation, but it's all underground.
Buried, yep, and that's all per, you'll see, you might not, but when we go in for our building and electrical permits, through all of that will be through the engineering and the building department there, and all of that will meet local standards, county standards.
Great. Commissioner Baker. Commissioner Conti.
I just wanted to say also to the neighbors that are in the areas that while we have this recorded commitment from the applicant to work with you on these things, the other resource that you have is our public works staff, Diane Kosis, and the engineering division. And one of the conditions of approval on this is always that they'll address these concerns through our staff. So consider them a resource, is what I'm saying.
Commissioner Conti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering, can you share with us why, out of all the plots of ground out there, this particular one was chosen, and also why did we choose to, I believe we're at 14 megawatts that we're going to be generating off this. Is that correct? Or 10?
So
10 megawatts?
Yes.
Okay.
It's 10. Why do you keep bouncing?
And why did we choose to stop at 10? Why not 12? Why not 15? Why not any other magic number? Are there limitations as to what the substation can receive? Is there other, maybe that could also help to alleviate our homeowners in the area as far as expansion. Why, if we've chosen only to develop to this point, why it might stay at this point, or how easy it would be, or what the mindset would be to expand.
Great, good questions. Thank you. The reason we chose this parcel, we did as once we spoke with IREA and had an agreement with them to build a 10 megawatt facility at this substation. So the system size is driven by a few things. One of them largely is the agreement with the utility. So, for example, the 75 megawatt that's been mentioned a couple of times down at the Brick Center substation, that one was where IREA could bring in that size capacity of a solar facility. So, why we chose this parcel when we knew we could do a 10 megawatt site in this area, similar to Bennett and the substation there, we did a full kind of look everywhere, and we need to be close to a substation. So if we were to go, very far, more than 2 miles away from a substation, our upgrade costs and our interconnection costs and the electrical run become prohibitive. So that's one of the criteria for locating a site. The other, of course, criteria are the landowners. Do we have willing landowners that are interested in doing something like this, in leasing their land, or in some cases selling their land? In this case, this was the site that the landowner was interested in a lease, and it was close enough to a substation to make it work, and it could fit the 10 megawatts that IREA had requested in this area for that substation.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Zimmerman.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And are there any further questions for Ms. Kosis? And I think that was a great point. Thank you, Commissioner Baker, that Diane is a real advocate for us. And so any questions that landowners have and everything should contact you. So thank you. Okay, I'll entertain a motion. Commissioner Baker.
In the case of U17-003, Wolf Creek Solar Use by Special Review, I have read the staff report including all exhibits and attachments, and have listened to the applicant's presentation and any public comment as presented at the hearing, and hereby move to approve this application based on the findings in the staff report, subject to the following conditions. 1, the applicant makes any modifications to plans as requested by the Public Works and Development Department prior to the signing of the Mylars and before any construction is started on this project. 2, the applicant shall address all Engineering Services Division comments and concerns, including but not limited to grading, erosion, sediment control, the right-of-way, and street cut permits, a gravel roadway agreement, etc., or as identified in their reports prior to the start of construction. 3, the applicant shall provide for the removal of the solar power plant if and when the solar power plant has been abandoned and is no longer functional or operational for a period of more than 1 year through the use of a performance bond to Arapahoe County to be provided by the applicant before the project becomes operational or through some other guarantee of removal of the equipment. 4, the applicant shall meet all of the requirements stipulated by the Strasburg Fire Protection District. 5, the applicant shall meet all of the requirements stipulated by IREA.
Motion made by Commissioner Baker. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Jackson. Any further comments, questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Thanks, everyone, and thank you, everybody, for being here. Okay. Any commissioner comments? Seeing none, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Are you going to be here for the budget?